Welcome, listeners, to the Let's Talk and Walk podcast. Today, we are walking in the city discussing a new, interesting topic about, well, a pretty dramatic political story from 2025.
That's right. We're digging into the relationship between Donald Trump and Elon Musk that year. An analysis we looked at called it a supercharged alliance that ended in a, quote, spectacular flameout.
Quite the description. And our walk today, our deep dive, is really about tracing that whole arc. How did it start? Why did it collapse so spectacularly?
And importantly, what does it tell us about, the mix of big money, political power, and actual policy decisions? The source material, mostly analysis drawing on news reports and research, gives us a lot to chew on.
Right. And we want to explore why you, listening now, should care about this. Because it wasn't just celebrity drama, was it?
Oh, definitely not. As the sources show, this whole feud had real-world ripple effects. We're talking financial markets, access to space, even things like social safety net funding. It touched a lot of areas.
Okay, so let's maybe start at the beginning. Musk wasn't always in Trump's corner, politically speaking. The analysis highlights quite a pivot.
A huge pivot, yeah. He'd identified more with Democrats historically, or at least voted that way. But then, boom, he becomes the single largest Republican donor in that cycle.
How much are we talking?
The figure cited is nearly $300 million, which is, a massive amount, a real statement of alignment.
$300 million certainly gets attention, and the report suggests this wasn't just writing a check. He became very visible very quickly.
Absolutely. Suddenly, he's at the rallies, the inauguration.
Yeah?
There was even that photo op with him and Trump looking at a Tesla parked right there at the White House. Very public displays of closeness.
And this closeness, this access, seemed to lead pretty directly to a role in the administration, didn't it? Something called DOGE.
Yeah, the Department of Government Efficiency,
Right.
but DOGE. Initially, the report said he was co-leading it, though its official status was kind of murky. But the analysis suggests he was effectively the driving force, the unpaid de facto head.
Okay, so he's inside leading this DOGE initiative. What was the mission there? What were they actually trying to do?
Efficiency was the banner, but the method was, cuts. Massive cuts. The proposals aim for something like a 75% reduction in the federal workforce.
75%? That's drastic.
It is. And trillions in overall spending cuts were floated. They targeted specific things, too, like gutting state health department grants, dismantling the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, and slashing USAID funding significantly.
Wow. Those are some incredibly ambitious and potentially controversial targets. Did the analysis we looked at examine whether these proposed cuts would actually, create efficiency or save the money they claimed?
It did, and that's a key point. While DOGE announced these enormous projected savings, several independent analyses quoted in the source material found the figures just weren't realistic.
How so?
Well, they were based on, let's say, questionable math, inflated values for assets, things like that. The verifiable cuts achieved were apparently much, much smaller than advertised.
So not quite the revolution in government spending that was promised.
It seems not. And, kind of ironically, the reports indicate that total federal spending actually increased during this period, despite DOGE's efforts. So the narrative of huge savings seems more like political messaging than physical reality, according to these sources.
Interesting. Okay, so Musk is heading DOGE, pushing these cuts, seemingly aligned with Trump, but then things unraveled very quickly, right after he left that role.
Extremely quickly. He left DOGE, I think it was May 2025. And almost immediately, he starts publicly attacking this major piece of legislation Trump was pushing, the one Trump called the Big Beautiful Bill.
Attacking his former ally's signature bill. What was Musk's stated reason?
He framed it publicly as being about the deficit. He said the bill would increase it, that it would undermine all the supposed efficiency work DOGE had done. He called it a disgusting abomination.
Strong words. But the analysis suggests there might have been another layer to this, something more personal or business related.
Exactly. That's where the electric vehicle subsidies come in. The analysis dug into the details of that big, beautiful bill and found provisions that would significantly curtail EV tax credits.
And EV credits are obviously crucial for
Tesla's bottom line, directly hitting their business model. So the timing, right after leaving DOGE and right as this bill threatened EV credits, strongly suggests his opposition wasn't just abstract fiscal conservatism.
It looks very much like a case where the mutual benefits that underpin the alliance suddenly diverged. His corporate interests clashed with the political direction.
That's precisely the conclusion the analysis leans towards. The transactional nature of the relationship became really clear when their interests were no longer aligned.
And once that break happened, it wasn't handled quietly, was it? It spilled out very publicly.
Oh, completely. It became this intense, direct feud, played out largely on social media platforms. No filters, no traditional media intermediaries for the most part.
What kind of things were being said? The sources mentioned some pretty explosive claims.
Yeah, it got personal and high stakes fast. Musk apparently claimed Trump owed his election victory to him. Trump, in turn, reportedly threatened SpaceX's government contracts.
Threatening SpaceX contracts, that's huge, given their role with NASA and defense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Musk didn't back down. He reportedly counter-threatened regarding the Dragon capsule, the U.S.'s only way to the ISS then, and even brought up the Epstein files, which is quite something in a political spat.
Goodness. That's playing hardball, to put it mildly. And because this was all happening out in the open on social media.
Reaction was immediate, both in public opinion and significantly in the financial markets. There was no waiting for the evening news. The impact was instantaneous.
Let's talk about that market impact. Tesla stock took a hit.
A major hit. The sources cite a drop of over 14% on the day the conflict really blew up. That apparently wiped out something like $150 billion in market value.
$150 billion, just like that.
Just like that. It really highlights what the analysis calls a political risk premium attached to Musk's companies. Their value became visibly tied to his political relationships, and in this case, his political conflicts.
And you have to think about the investors, right? People who maybe bought Tesla stock thinking Musk's government access was a benefit suddenly see it become a massive liability.
Precisely. The calculation changed overnight for them. And the fallout wasn't just financial. You mentioned the SpaceX contracts. That raises national security concerns.
How so?
Well, SpaceX had, and still has, critical contracts for resupplying the International Space Station, launching classified government satellites. Trump reportedly threatening to just terminate those contracts, even if it wasn't legally simple, sent shockwaves.
And Musk's counter threat about the Dragon capsule.
That underscored the vulnerability. If he theoretically decommissioned Dragon, the U.S. would lose its independent access to the ISS at that point. It highlighted a potential single point of failure tied to this one individual and his political disputes.
Now, the experts cited in the analysis were skeptical. These threats, like terminating contracts or decommissioning capsules, were actually feasible from a legal or practical standpoint.
Yes, there were significant hurdles. But the mere fact that these threats were reportedly made in the heat of the moment between a former president and the head of a critical space company, that itself was deeply concerning to observers. It showed how intertwined things had become.
And politically, did this feud have wider ripples within the party or the political landscape?
It definitely caused friction. Some figures within the Republican Party actually sided with Musk's criticisms of the spending bill, creating internal divisions.
So it wasn't just Trump versus Musk. It started to draw in other players.
To some extent, yes. And Musk even floated the idea publicly of starting a new political party. The America Party, he apparently called it. While that didn't necessarily go anywhere concrete immediately, it signaled a potential realignment, a breaking away from the established structure, sparked by this very personal, very public feud.
Okay, so let's try to bring this all together as we wrap up our walk through this analysis. We've traced this relationship from Musk's big pivot and donation.
Right, through his role leading DOGE, the controversial cuts, the flawed efficiency claims.
Then the sudden break, triggered by the big beautiful bill, and, crucially, the threat to EV credits.
Leading to that explosive public feud on social media, the threats back and forth involving SpaceX and national security assets.
The massive market reaction, the Tesla stock plunge, and the political tremors it caused.
It's quite a story, and the core takeaway from the source material seemed to be that this wasn't just a personality clash. It was really an example of an alliance built almost purely on transactional benefit. When those benefits diverged, the whole thing crumbled.
And it highlights the immense influence that concentrated private wealth can have in politics, doesn't it? Especially when combined with direct access, even an informal role like Musk had with DOGE.
The analysis makes that point very strongly. It draws parallels to historical periods like the Gilded Age, but notes that Musk's direct, albeit unpaid, operational role within a government function like DOGE was perhaps a new level of blurred lines between private interest and public governance.
Right. And understanding the specific story helps you, the listener, see the bigger picture. You can see how these high-level relationships and fallouts aren't abstract. They can directly impact your investments, like with the Tesla stock volatility.
Or they can influence major policy decisions that affect things like global aid funding through initiatives like DOGE, even if the claimed savings didn't materialize. And of course, the future of critical sectors like space exploration.
It really brings it home. And it leaves us with a pretty significant question, one the sources implicitly raise. In our current age, where you have this incredible concentration of wealth, plus social media platforms that amplify every single conflict instantly.
Yeah, how do we ensure that the big decisions, the policies that affect everyone, are genuinely driven by the broader public interest? How do we safeguard against them being overly influenced by the personal agendas or the corporate bottom lines of a very small number of powerful individuals?
That's definitely the critical question to ponder. A lot to think about there.
Indeed. It shows the complexities and the stakes involved when private power and public governance intersect so directly.
All right, that wraps up our walk for today. It definitely gave us a lot to think about, maybe something to mull over with a coffee or a snack.
It was a really interesting one, and we truly hope you all listening enjoyed it as much as we did. Thanks for joining us.
We greatly value your engagement. If you found this episode informative, please consider leaving a like. We also welcome your suggestions for new topics and areas you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Feel free to share those in the comments section.
And finally, to ensure you don't miss out on our upcoming content, please hit the subscribe button and share it with your friends.
We look forward to bringing you more interesting discussions. Thank you for listening to the Let's Talk and Walk podcast.